Hello my friends and welcome back to the Divide and Conquer version 5 faction overview videos. This week we return with the Men of Bree and the Shire. Now I've been reading a lot of your comments. In fact, I read every comment. I might not reply to them, but I try to get to them when I can. Some of the advice was to, one, do the second turn. That way it shows where all the auto expansions are without guessing. And the second was toggling the Fog of War to show all the settlements without like guessing where things are roughly. It makes more sense, and I think at this point too everyone is familiar with the map. It's not like there's really any spoilers. You know, if I toggle the Fog of War, you'll discover these things, even if it's your first time in Divide and Conquer, and even if you don't know anything about, say, Lord of the Rings, it's pretty quickly that you will discover where all the towns and settlements are if you just play on your own anyway. So under that notion, the Fog of War is now lifted, and it is turn 2. So, going with the Bree, I guess the best thing to start with Bree would be how they work as a faction. So, you are a middleman nation. You start off with only the settlement of Bree, and then 3 settlements in the Shire being Hobbiton, Longbottom, and Mitchell Delving. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Mikhail Delving, or I'm pretty sure I've always called it Mitchell Delving, but it could be a different pronunciation there. Anyway, the other Hobbit villages are simply represented by the Hobbit farmsteads and the other random resource models put on the map. I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be others like around here, the gate. I forget where all the Hobbit villages are roughly, but there's Longbottom, Hobbiton, Tuckborough, I forget the other names, but there's other Hobbit villages in like the original Third Age and in much earlier versions of Divide and Conquer. There used to be, I think, up to 4 or maybe 5 settlements in the Shire, but now it is only 3, being Delving, Hobbiton, and Longbottom. And you start with Bree itself. You have no other territory. To your east, you have the Dunedain. To the south, you have Matriath, which is owned by the Dunedain now in version 5. Mengellan, which is owned by the Barrow-wights, and to the north, the Dunedain will have Deadman's Dyke and Anuminos. So mostly you're in a relatively safe realm. Mostly you just have rebels to the south at Mengellan going into like northern Cardalon over here. To your far west, you do have Undertowers Oskalone. You might be able to swoop up Perth and Lune if you rushed for it, though if I had to guess, I'm sure the dwarves would beat you there. But you do have plenty of options for rebel expansion. Oskalone, Barquetta, though I wouldn't advise the settlements. They're not that wealthy, especially Oskalone. It's pretty poor. Undertowers is a good thing to grab because it has the one of the Palantir there, which do give you, I believe, as the Bree-landers, a trade bonus. I'll have to double check that later. But going into the south, Corwillishar, Karis, Nurnaled, Aragond, your primary enemies as the Bree-landers will mostly come in the form of Dunland and Enedwythe, should you decide to go at war with the Wildmen. You could always ally with Enedwythe, and then that'll make your campaign a bit easier. And then it's really only just Dunland and then Angmar when they come from the north. If you leave the Dunedain to their own devices, eventually they will probably fall to Angmar in the north, so you will need to support them against the northern enemy. There's always a chance that if Erluin rejects the rings and works together with the Dunedain, they might be able to take out Angmar, and you might not have to do a single thing, but I would put that on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of, you know, how likely that is to happen. So anyway, we've gone through the starting settlements. We'll get into Mengellan later on in the video about the scripts happening here. We'll go into your starting generals. So you do have Council Master Barlaman Butterbur of the Prancing Pony Inn. He has taken up into arms, and he is your faction leader, which I have always been a fan of. He does come with the very powerful Bree-lander Gatekeepers, a crossbow and halberd unit. So very powerful, and they put down your stakes. Though do note, being a general and having a special ability, which he has defensive stance, you will not be able to actually put down stakes with Barlaman, or any general unit for that matter that has stakes. If anything has a stake and it's your general, you won't be able to put down the stakes because it'll have the Horde Rally option instead. You also have Councilman Andy, who comes with the standard bodyguard of the Council's Guard. He also comes with Greenway Riders and Greenway Spearmen. One thing to note also is that Bree actually starts with the Great Roads already unlocked. So you have Tier 3 roads in Bree, giving you a huge amount of movement for your military here. And Bree is the center of your empire. This is where all the, I guess you could say, all the military recruitment is going to be, and much of your economy. So keep Bree safe. You have one fort on your south and another fort to your north, with one at west by the Shire. The other forts are owned by the Dunedain, but there is an independent one in the Theodore region here north of Coloniac that you might be able to grab. As for the Shire, you have Bilbo Baggins himself with the Mithril Coat, a very powerful retinue. Plus 5 hit points, you can give that to anyone else or have Bilbo in your front lines, however you want to do it. Though, granted, he does just have the lower tier Dwarven Travelers as a bodyguard. Not the worst unit. Bilbo's bodyguard is pretty upgraded, 8 melee attack, 3 missile, 11 defense, because he does have the armor upgrade and the chevrons. But I would definitely advise taking this Mithril Coat and giving it to someone else. Maybe Barlaman himself if you want to keep him safe and secure. You also have Alf, just a random Hobbit general who's hanging out here kind of in the middle of the Shire. I tried to look into who Alf could have been. I didn't really find any Hobbit named Alf or anyone in the family trees of the other Hobbits that would suggest a Hobbit named Alf. So as far as I can tell, he is just a remnant from Third Age 3, the original mod, when they had a couple random Hobbit generals. There's also Will, who is farther down here. He is stationed in Longbottom. Same thing with Will. I couldn't find any correlation between him and any of the family trees, but if I missed something, maybe let me know. Maybe it is mentioned in the book somewhere that Will is the mayor of Longbottom, but I could not find anything. And then also in Mitchell Delving, however we call it, you have a Paladin, and this is actually Paladin Took. He doesn't have a biography, but this is Peregrine Took's father, and he acts as the 32nd Thane of the Shire. It's either 32nd or 31st. But yeah, he is the Thane of the Shire, and he is posted in Mitchell Delving. Now, unlike Hobbiton and Longbottom, Mitchell Delving does not actually have building restrictions. You can fully upgrade this to the city level with all of the buildings. However, the Hobbit settlements, you actually cannot upgrade them. The fact that it shows walls here is misleading. These settlements cannot be upgraded, and they have a very limited build option. As for Bree, though, it is also completely unrestricted. It starts off as a large city, so it's already fully upgraded. I believe, yes, if you do the script 2 with the mercenaries, you can upgrade it farther. But for right now, it just is as it is. I could be mistaken on that. It might already be at its max level. In fact, it definitely is, because it's already a huge city and it has a unique battle map. So don't listen to me there. That is pretty much it. Did I miss any generals? Oh yes, of course, Brethor the Ranger, who is stationed at the Longbottom Gatehouse here. He does come with the standard Dunedain bodyguard, which will go more in depth on the Dunedain video, which is not too far out in the future. But it just gives you a bit of uniqueness there. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 7 starting generals across 4 settlements. So you'll want to expand and ideally get Elf to be a governor somewhere. The Hobbit governors always have really great traits, like +2 to farming here, +1 to his acumen. They're typically always great to have in a settlement to help it make some money. Throwing Bilbo in there, I mean, that's an extra 300 gold for Hobbiton, for example. So there could be some use to put Elf in Bree, and then you can send Barlaman out into the world. And now we will also go into the recruitment. So Bree does not use a traditional military infrastructure like the other factions do. Instead, all of their units will come from their respective economic buildings. So just like the Dunedain, the hunting camp does give you your woodland hunters and your lumbermen when you upgrade that. The siege works is standard. However, if we go into the master builders and you get the mason's hall, that does unlock your journeyman. Getting the marketplaces will give you merchant cavalry and merchant militia. Having roads will give you Greenway riders and Greenway spearmen, though this is only along the traditional route of the Greenway, which roughly extends from, I'm not sure if it includes Stadmanstyke or Numinos, but at the very least, Bree into Mangellan to Mitraith down to Tharbad. That is considered the Greenway. So anywhere that you have great roads or tier 2 roads and above, you will actually have the Greenway units as an option. Additionally, going into their other buildings, if you go to the chicken farming, Bree is now the only faction in the game that has the farmhand pikemen, so they are found in the standard building that hosts them. Going into their town halls, you do get the watchman units at the tier 3 Lord's Hall, giving you the watchman axe guard, sword guard, and the bow guard. And then from the Dunedain camp, you get the rangers and wardens, while your Bree-land militia units come from your farm line, so Bree-land militia and archer militia. That's pretty much it for their standard recruitment. Bree has a unique script in the fact that at about 60 turns in, it actually kicks off at turn 65 or 66, you will be informed of the council. They will be meeting for a year to make a decision. At turn 70, just about, you will be given the option to choose between either joining with the Dunedain, which will give you access to an extended Dunedain roster, as well as the Dunedain armor upgrades. In addition to that, you will get the Elven support from Lindon to the west, or you can instead join the Mercantile Route, which will instead give you dwarves and mercenaries from all around the world. As for the units that you pretty much get there, they are mostly the same, though there have been a few changes going into version 5. So for version 5 changes, you get the Longbeard Phalanx instead of the Longbeard Swordsman from the Mercenary Route. You'll also get the Rovanian Riders and Hunters from the first tier of the Mercenary Lodge, but they are removed in the second tier, in which case they are replaced with the Privateer Axemen and the Privateer Cavalry. I can actually show the building here if I go to the Gathering Halls in Castle, I believe. Wait. There we go. So at the Mercenaries Hall, you do get the Dunlending Longspears, Landsmen, Saarline Mercenaries, Rovanian Hunters, and Rovanian Riders. Upgrading this to the Mercenary Lodge, you then get the Privateer Cavalry, Barandor Mercenaries, Faerun Mercenaries, and the Regent Bowguard. In addition, you also do get the Tharbad Royal Guard should you go to Tharbad. I am now going to load it over to the Mercantile Route real fast, so I'll cut it back when we get there. And I have loaded a save in which I have actually modified the script to kick in significantly earlier, so it is only turn 10, because I did not want to go through 70 turns of waiting to get here. So here I have built up the Mercenaries Lodge in Bree, which does show that the Rovanian units do get phased out for the upgraded Privateer Cavalry. The Regent Bowguard are new from version 4.6 to version 5. They were not in the previous rendition of the Mercenary Route. And then also in Bree at the Prancing Pony, you will have the Crossbows, Phalanx, Shield Guard, and the Hammer Guard, in addition to the Dwarven Travelers like you standard get at the Prancing Pony. And if you pick the Mercenary Route, you also unlock a Merchant that you can recruit at the Prancing Pony, which normally you do need the Merchant's Guild for, but you will get them here. And then here's all of the units pretty much just ready to go, except for the Dwarves. They take some time to actually join your faction. But the Privateer Axemen, Cavalry, Hrondor, Mercs, all the standard good stuff here. They do have a relatively long replenishment time, which should be, looks like it's actually about 20 turns each. I thought it was based on how far the unit was, but it seems that was changed. So each mercenary unit you can train once every 20 turns. And additionally, this building is available at all settlements that once you get to the respective tiers. So at Mickeldelving, you could upgrade to the Mercenaries Hall once it's a large town, into the Mercenaries Lodge once it is a city. So there's unrestriction on the mercenary buildings here, so they're not limited only to Bree. In addition, you'll also get Reginald, who there is currently a bug with him. He comes out looking like he is looking to steal some Infinity Stones, so don't mind the purple visuals there. I've already reported that. But he does come with 2 units of sellswords. He himself is a sellsword bodyguard. Also has a biography, a couple extra hit points always helps. The story with him is that he basically is a renowned mercenary from Darwinion, known for his brutality and his savagery in battle. So he is Reginald the Slayer. During the beta, it was planned to also allow the sellswords to be recruited in the Mercenaries Lodge, but the reason they are omitted is that it resulted in them acting as the default general's bodyguard for your faction. So picking that would mean that each time you recruited one, it would act as the bodyguard unit and train a new general. And then also, if you had like a new family member or an adoption, they would also be sellswords, and you would not have your council's guard anymore, like the one that Councilman Andy has. So it was then omitted. Instead, you just get Reginald and an extra unit. Though generally, you can find sellswords in pretty much all regions of the world just through the mercenary tab anyway, so they are still recruitable, just not through Bree's unique mercenary recruitment. And now I will switch it over to the Dunedain choice, so I will cut it back in just a second. And now we are returned here in turn 12 with the Dunedain. So one thing I forgot to mention during the Mercantile Route is that should you pick that route, you will actually lose Brethor the Ranger and your ability to train the Dunedain. So you will lose all of your Dunedain units that you currently had recruited as they leave you to go back to their own faction, basically. So on the Dunedain Route, you are then able to unlock the Dunedain Outpost, which will give you Sworn Horsemen and Dunedain Blade Masters in addition to the standard Wardens and Rangers that you could normally recruit as Bree. So it gives you a very powerful Claymore wielding unit and the Sworn Horsemen, which are definitely stronger than your current horse options, being the Merchant Cavalry and the Greenway Spearmen. In addition to that, you will unlock the Tier 4 armor as Bree. So if we go to the Blacksmith, in addition to the armor, it also is your source of your melee weapon bonus. So if you want your troops to have, you know, that sweet +1 attack bonus, go for the Dunedain route. And finally, instead of Reginald, you do get a different general, his name being Alderan. He comes from Lindon, and he comes equipped with the High Elfin Calaquendi Lord. So it's only him. You don't get 2 units of these, it's just Alderan. If these Calaquendi Lords die, then you won't have them anymore, but they are a very powerful bodyguard. And in addition to that, you get the option to recruit Amanyar Riders, Sindar Archers, and Sindar Axemen from Mitchell Delving, not in any other region of the world, only here. So they come from the office of the Mayor of Mitchell Delving. So that's pretty much it for the differences between the Mercantile and the Dunedain route. It's really, do you want to have mercenaries and basically have the option to recruit those at any city, or do you want the higher tier armor upgrades that also unlock the Dunedain / Arnorian visuals for your units, which I'll show off when we get to the campaign map side, or the battle map side. We're already in the campaign. Additionally, another thing I forgot to mention looking at my notes here is that should you join the mercenary route, you actually get the Dwarven Siege equipment, so you no longer would have the standard catapult and ballista that the humans have. Instead, you actually get the Dwarven Grape Shot catapult and the Dwarven Double Shot ballista, so a bit of uniqueness there. So with the Dunedain, you get Dunedain Elves in your roster, higher tier smithing, and with the mercenaries, you get 4 different Dwarven units, plus their artillery, and then the capability to recruit their mercenaries from anywhere around the world. And so pretty much, honestly, that's pretty much it for Bree's campaign. Essentially, it's, for the most part, I would say you're going to end up going south. You're going to end up fighting predominantly probably Dunland. Taking Tharbad would be great to keep them out of your heartland. And then from there, you can expand farther and take out the Wildmen here. You're relatively on par, though Dunland's forces, you know, the new Dunland roster, they're arguably a bit stronger than what you can field, so you'll have to use some trickery or your Dwarven allies or the Dunedain to help you fight off Dunland, as they have some very powerful warriors, and Enwife has very powerful skirmishers, but I think Dunland is the stronger of the two that you'd have to fight. Do note there's always the chance of Angmar coming down from the northeast and causing attrition in your lands and devastation, which I should also speak of before we move on to the battle map. So there are quite a few rebel bands that are spread out in Bree's region. So as you can see here where Arquette would be, which is now just a village, it used to be a settlement. Captain Eddie, he does not start with these roughly 13 units or so, but rather there will be a 5-unit bandit stack here representing of the bandits that actually use the woods here, the Chetwood, northeast of Bree, and they attempted to assault Bree at one point, and it did not go so well. Bill Fernie and Harry Goatleaf, the gatekeeper, ended up joining with their band, and then their lot ended up joining with Saruman during the scouring of the Shire. So initially there are 5 bandits here. There's additionally, as you can see, the devastation up here. There is a rebel army stationed in these woods, and I believe the other one is somewhere out in the northeast. It might be along the Great Road. I could be misremembering it. Just be wary of the bandits. There are quite a few in Bree, but they are only in Bree. As far as I'm aware, there shouldn't be any in the Shire or around Mitchell Delving. It's just around the roads here as these bandits try to prey on merchants and lone travelers. So, but once you take care of them, you're relatively safe. And that's pretty much it for Bree. Oh, and additionally, Mangalin, before I forget about that. If you take Mangalin and these Barrow White armies spawn, every time you defeat them, it will add population to Mangalin, allowing you to grow it much, much quicker. And once you do upgrade it and restore the Barrows, you unlock the Dunedain Steel Bowman. And so yeah, that does it for the campaign map side of Bree. You are not a particularly strong military-focused nation, though you do have basically the best breadbasket in Middle-earth, being the Shire and Bree itself. I mean, this is 12 turns in. I've done literally nothing for building except for I started the Dunedain outpost here in Bree. And look, Longbottom and Hobbiton, the Shire, and Mitchell Delving, like, these are making like 2,000 gold by themselves, along with Bree is making 1,000 gold. Bree is a very, very wealthy settlement, and the Shire regions can make a lot of money, but they are quite vulnerable, so definitely defend them as well as you can. And also, I guess I didn't mention this earlier, I'm sorry this is so all over the place, guys, but the Watch Sheriffs and the Bandover's Archers come from anywhere that has the Smiles building. So I'll now take it over to the battle map, where at first I'm going to go through the mercenary units, and then I'll go through the standard Bree-land units. So now we've returned with the mercenary units that Bree is able to recruit. This does not encompass the entire mercenary roster of Bree, but rather the units that do not have their own typical respective faction. So I've not included things like the Rudar Landsmen, for example, or the Dunlending Longspears, but I have included the general regional mercenaries that you can get, as I figured it makes the most sense to talk about the mercenaries here in the Bree-land video, though for whatever reason the bandits and the sellswords are omitted from their custom battle roster, so I won't really talk about them in this video, and I might not get to them at all depending on how things go. But anyway, Rovanian Hunters, I want to start here in the front. So the Rovanian Hunters, you can pick up from the Mercenary Lodge a 5 melee attack, 9 missile attack, not good against armor, but high base damage, good against mounts, okay defense. They give you pretty much your only option to a Javelin unit if you play as Bree. Worthy to pick these up should you ever decide to go into Crusades in Harad, as they can take out elephants very well. And they'll do okay against some of the forces you're likely to fight, like Dunland and Anandwythe, due to their lighter armor. Plus, they have a shield which helps them in that skirmishing role. So the Rovanian units, not too fancy, I'm going to put them off to the side. Next, we'll have the Rovanian Riders, giving you a swift but very light and relatively weak cavalry unit. Only 2 attack, though 5 charge, and 5 on their secondary attack. So their spear, you get an attack of 7 on the charge as being cavalry, and then it goes down to a 5. Though if they do not charge, they're not going to do too much with these spears. They give you a nice, solid, light cavalry option. They will run faster than your merchant cavalry, but don't expect too much from Rovanian Riders. Next up, we'll have Sauerline Mercenaries. These guys you can also just pick up if you go to Siduri. This is where they come from. So a relatively okay halberd unit, 4 attack, 5 charge, 8 total defense. Being that they are halberds, they are good against mounts and armor. Though halberds in this game are not good at withstanding charges, so try not to let them take a charge from cavalry. Rather, they are best used supporting an engagement where cavalry are already pinned in place either by a spear wall or supporting another cavalry unit. Even though they have a spear wall as a formation, it just does not help them survive against frontal charges. They will get absolutely destroyed by anything of their tier or higher. So just be wary of that, though they have bonuses against knights, like they can go down pretty fast to a frontal charge. Their halberds do not help them survive against that. Next up, we'll do the Privateer Axemen. These guys are very heavily armored. 8 attack, 16 defense, good against armor. Absolute beasts these guys are, though they are quite expensive, and oftentimes you'll see these guys as rebel generals and garrison units in rebel villages. Not too threatening. They can be taken down from range, especially with your, say, hobbits, or any archer unit can take care of Privateer Axemen given enough bolts. So they do have 11 armor, so armor piercing does significantly help against them. Their mounted variant are the Privateer Cavalry. Though they also hold axes, these ones are not effective against armor, and they do lose 1 point of defense skill, though they are the mobile contingent, and these guys are actually really powerful. It's good to pick these up if you go on the mercenary route, as they are better than the Sworn Horsemen and better than your your merchant cavalry. So good to have Privateer Cavalry. They are expensive and they are misleading. You'd think they'd be armor piercing with their bardiches or axes here, but they are not. Going to the last two mercenary units, and arguably the ones farthest from Bree, the Horondor Mercenaries come up first, 7 attack, 15 defense, so just a little bit weaker than the Privateer Axemen, though they actually do have a bonus in heated areas, so if you are going to go into Harad, take these guys with you. 15 defense, they are more better in their defense skill than their armor, so they'll suffer more against missiles. But they are, other than that, a solid and respectable axe unit, and I believe they've gotten a facelift. I could be wrong about that. And then lastly, we have the Faerûn Mercenaries. Honestly, my favorite mercenary unit in the game. These guys have 12 attack, 16 defense. They are good against mounts, so they do not have any shield wall or anything like that. They do function like two-handers, like axemen, with these really cool, like, I guess this would be a sort of like kind of like a Naginata is what I think of when I see these guys here. So very cool designs. I've always been a fan of the Faerûn Mercenaries. So these guys are great to have, but they are a bit expensive. That high attack, though, does make them quite strong. Just don't let them be the ones taking a charge, and they'll do wonders for you against other cavalry. So that does it for the mercenaries. I will now transition over to the standard Bree roster. And here we are with the standard military roster of Bree. Now, there were too many units to show the armor upgrades side by side, so I will be showing the upgraded visuals after we get through the roster here, and then show you what you unlock should you pick the Dunedain path. So we'll start with the infantry, and then the cavalry, and then the missiles. So, starting off with your infantry, as Bree, you have the Bree-land militia. They're kind of standard bread and butter, 2 attack, 5 defense spear units, so they're a bit weaker than the other spear units of, say, Anduin and Angmar, who come at 2-6. So you can't really expect too much out of these guys. Definitely they're meant to be used defensively or as fodder. Don't expect these guys to be winning you any walls fights anytime soon, or ever, really. I can't think of a unit that they would beat outside of, like, maybe Snaga? Like, Snaga skirmishers they would probably beat, but outside of that, don't have them on the walls. They're, meant to just, absorb arrows, fight off cavalry, and hold a line, though their low defensive stats leave much to be desired in that route. Use them as you would any cheap spearman unit in Medieval 2. Next to them, we have the farmhand pikemen. You either love them or you hate them. They have been restricted to only Bree now, so the other factions that used to love having a very cheap and easy to get pike unit, well, now, sorry to say that they are now Bree exclusive. So 2 attack, 3 charge, though charge with pikes almost never applies. 6 defense, so they'll hold the line significantly better than the Bree-land militia, given the fact that they are pikes and have the extra large range, especially if you put them in, defensive mode. Aside of that, they are weak to arrows, only 2 armor, so their only defense against missiles is that 2 armor. And should they get rear charge, they have low mass, so cavalry can press them from behind, but then they'll turn around and do a lot of damage back. So, if you've played Divide and Conquer for a while, you know what to do with farmhand pikemen, you know how they function. They are, of course, your only pike unit outside of the mercenary route. So keep that in mind, that if you want pikes, your only option would be the farmhand pikemen on the Dunedain route. Or you also get the dwarves, of course, with the mercenary route, but at a very, very infrequent interval. So predominantly you'd be using these. I do recommend picking up a lot of these guys, though. They'll help you significantly in the campaign, keep cavalry at bay, keep your enemy from getting too far into your ranks. So it is definitely worthwhile to invest in the chicken farming. Next off, we have the lumbermen. These guys come from the upgraded woodland camp. They have 5 attack, 7 charge, which is actually pretty significant, but only 3 defense. Being that they are axemen, they are armor piercing, but they are incredibly weak. They have low defensive skill, so they are meant to flank into a armored unit, and fight supported with another unit, but they cannot function on your front line, and anything that shoots at them, they will suffer greatly for that. So keep that in mind. Use them as you would other shock infantry. They can be, hidden. Well, I wouldn't say hidden. Like, they can be secret bodyguard killers, given the fact of their armor piercing and high charge. Say you're fighting like an Angmar bodyguard, having some lumbermen around to do bodyguard assassinating could be very useful. But obviously, you don't want them to fight alone. If they fight a bodyguard head on, they will just get absolutely destroyed due to their low combat stats. Next to them, you do have the Greenway Spearmen, 5 attack, 13 defense, so a very respectable spear and shield unit. Typically better attack than you see in this tier, though the defense is a little bit lower than what I've seen from other factions. The standard's like 4, probably 414, so they get a little more attack. They do get the shield wall. Their morale is only average, so they will need your general alive. They cannot hold for long, and things that cause terror can definitely impact these guys, but on a side note, I do really like the way the regular Bree-landers look. Like, they're just men. They're just like the most standard European kind of medieval 2 men that you can see. And I love the mix of like the round oval kind of shields here and then these square shields. I just think that looks really nice. So Greenway Spearmen, very, very nice defensive spear unit. Don't expect them to win like battles against anything stronger than them, but they can hold the line, and the fact that they have the shield wall does give them added utility. So behind them, let's do the Merchant Militia next. These guys are pretty much just merchants. They've spent their money to buy arms and armor, though they lack combat experience. They have poor morale. They do have 15 total defense, with 12 of that being armor. So anything with like armor piercing will destroy these guys because they have 0 defense skill and only 3 shields. So armor piercing arrows or armor piercing infantry will take out Merchant Militia. Anything that's not armor piercing, they'll actually hold out pretty well because of their high defensive stats. So they can't do really good just fighting on their own, but that poor morale is an issue. Should they take too many casualties, these men will surely flee before you. So as long as you keep them happy and put them against the right targets, they'll perform well for you. Next to them, we have the lovely Watchmen Battalion. So starting off, the Watchmen Axe Guard. These guys, a 6 attack, 5 charge, 12 defense unit with effective against armor. There are very few one-handed axe and shield units kind of left in the mod at this time, so it's kind of unique. Now you only really see this with like mace units. If they have armor piercing and they have a shield, they're typically given a mace. Though the Axe Guard have maintained their... Honestly, these are like two-handed axes that they're just carrying with one hand. So giant axes, solid defensive stats. Don't let them be your front line, but rather they can kind of fight in from supporting flanks. They'll do okay on the front, I guess, but really you'll want the Watchmen Sword Guard, who come with plus 2 more defense up to 14 and 3 more attack, though it is not armor piercing. Both these battalions do have average accuracy, and they come with those really, really cool like oval shields that I'm a big fan of, and really cool designs on the shield with the castle and the flowers there. They definitely don't look like they're from Lord of the Rings. They kind of look like they are just, European soldiers, but I think that's something that I really do like about Bree. So, the respectable units, you just need the Tier 3 Town Hall to unlock them. And the Sword Guard, not the Axe Guard, also come with the Shield Wall formation. Not exactly sure the reason for that, but it does give you them, that extra utility and mass to fight against cavalry charges. So the Sword Guard do better being at the front and center of your line, while the Axe Guard are good at kind of flanking. Not as good as like the Lumbermen are at charging, but they can function very well, and the fact that they have those shields keeps them alive against arrows better than other axemen do. Next off, we are going into the Merchant Infantry. These guys are your predominant skilled Merchant Infantry with pole hammers, and they are the only pole hammer unit in the game. I mean, there are great hammer units with the dwarves, but they're the only pole hammers, which I think is a neat piece of trivia. 7 attack, 8 charge, 20 defense, and even though they are merchant-based, they do have a significant defense skill of 6. Average morale, so not the best morale, but that very powerful charge and good offensive stats. These guys will serve you very well in your campaigns. Just keep them away from things like crossbows and armor-piercing archers and other armor-piercing units, and they'll do just fine. These guys are an absolute menace on the battlefield, and your best infantry unit alongside with your Council's Guard, who we will go into now. So the Council's Guard, mace and shield unit, 8 attack, 5 charge, 21 defense, with a good healthy mix of armor, defensive skill, and shield. Being your general's unit, they do have a good morale response, so they won't flee like your other units might, so Bree in general is kind of a lower morale faction. But outside of that, they're not too special. The armor piercing does make them stand out pretty unique, and they have very respectable stats at 21 defense. So your best defensive unit for all of your foot soldiers, and I believe actually your best defensive unit across your standard roster, discounting like the Dunedain, discounting the dwarves and the elves, for example. So they have the best defensive stats and very solid offensive stats. So a great bodyguard, definitely one of my favorites, and they are very, very useful. That does it for the infantry. We'll go through the cavalry really quick, starting off with your basic tier. In fact, I'm not sure which one I would put as the tier 1. They're kind of equal. So Greenway Riders are a 5 attack, 7 charge, 12 defense, average morale cavalry unit with a 4 secondary attack. So after they charge, they put their lances away and they switch to their swords. They don't have a bonus against anything particularly, nothing against like horses or wargs. Just a solid, respectable cavalry unit. Don't expect them to beat out against other cav that are higher than their caliber, but they can do okay harassing enemy archers and, doing hammer and anvil tactics. Next to them, we have the Merchant Cavalry, 4 attack instead of the 5 attack with a 15 total defense. Again, like the Merchant Infantry, that is entirely in their armor stat. These guys absolutely hate halberds. Keep them away from any halberd unit. They will just fall quicker than Snaga to like elven archers. These guys cannot last against that type of weapon. But outside of that armor does keep them alive against non-armor piercing foes, so orc archers, goblin archers, that sort of thing. Poor morale does mean that they are prone to fleeing, but they can be very effective at chasing into archers or sending them against. Should you fight any horse archers or warg archers, they can kind of fend off their arrows for the time being, though I'm almost certain warg horse archers would probably beat the merchant cavalry in melee. That's actually worth testing at some point, because they might fill a nice niche in that role, given their high armor, that they could, take out horse archers, but they might not win combat. So that'd be something interesting to test. But those are your 2 cavalry units, so you don't get many options, but you do at least have those 2. And now going into the archers, we'll start off with the Archer Militia. These guys are a 2-2-2 archer unit. Very poor morale, low accuracy, low range, only 18 missiles. But they are your cheap and plentiful militia archer unit. Good at defending your towns, good at being on the walls. And any archer unit with sheer volume of fire will end up giving you good returns. So as bad as they are still usable, and it's good to get quite a few of them in your armies just to spray down your enemies. I'd rather have more archer militia than I would Bree-land militia any day. Next to them, we have the journeymen, which fill a very interesting role for the Bree-land. Only 2 melee, though it is armor piercing as they wield hammers. 5 missile attack. They are the weakest crossbow unit in the game in terms of their missile attack. Only average accuracy, low range, 130 meters. 9 defense, with 5 of that being their shield, so they kind of function like Pavis crossbowmen, and that they can kind of take enemy archer fire relatively decently, and even in melee they function nicely as they can fight off other bodyguards and other heavily armored units, but they have very low stats. So they fill an interesting role as the worst crossbow unit in the game, but they make up for that given their high shield value and their armor-piercing melee attack, which is quite nice of them, actually. And it's always good to have these guys. If you're playing as Bree, they can work as general snipers, or if you're fighting the dwarves, I'd probably want a couple of these guys, in addition to the gatekeepers, which we'll get into in a few moments here. Against elves or cavalry, 1 volley from a crossbow can take a lot of models out of a cavalry or a unit of knights. So that's always one thing to keep in mind, though they are quite vulnerable to being charged, and they don't do that well in melee. Behind them, we have a significant upgrade over the Archer Militia. We have the Bandobras Archers, a 5 melee, 3 missile, 9 defense, only average accuracy, but 28 arrows and 170 meter range. They also inspire your nearby troops, so they'll keep the morale going for your kind of weaker units. So if you keep them by your merchants, it'll keep them fighting for a bit longer. They also come in default in a loose formation, which can be exaggerated even farther, so they do well fighting against enemy archers, given that loose status. And that's pretty much it about the Bandover's archers. A very solid Hobbit unit. Uh, yeah, can't really say too much else about them. They're nice to have, especially for that inspire effect that they do give. Oh, and they can hide anywhere as they are doing, so they work well to ambush your opponent. Next to them, you probably love them, the Watch Sheriffs. These are the stone-throwing hobbits. I mean, these stones, only one missile attack is very misleading. That is one missile attack, but armor-piercing. The accuracy says average, but these guys are deadly accurate with those stones, so don't pay that, don't pay that average as, oh, these guys are going to miss, half their shots. They will make contact, and they will slay whatever they throw rocks at. Additionally, they have 50 rocks each, basically saying that they just pick them up off the ground. So they will probably never run out of battle, or never run out of ammo in a regular battle. And these guys can take out even Sauron's bodyguard with enough volleys. They are quite powerful, and they also have an armor-piercing melee attack, given the fact that they have these kind of two-handed farm tools. So very, very nice unit, though they are not as well equipped as the Bandover's archers, but the fact that they have armor-piercing and the rocks makes them very, very useful, so it's always good to have some of these. Behind them, I have placed the Woodland Hunters, a notorious archer unit for being much stronger than it really has any right to be. Only 2 melee, but that is not their selling point. That is their 5 missile attack with high accuracy. So for whatever reason, these guys are just exceptionally good at their job at hunting. 3 defense, they are glass cannons. But honestly, I mean, you give a cheap unit like this, their upkeep is 155 gold a turn. So basically each man is getting a single piece of gold. High accuracy, high missile attack, very effective archer unit. Get as many of these as you can in your ranks, especially to replace your archer militia. Outside of that, keep them out of melee, even send them in to support in a melee fight, like rear flanking. They don't do that well with only 2 melee attack. They wield crude knives. So keep them out of combat, whatever you can do, unless it's a dire circumstance, or you're really trying to break the morale of like some goblin unit, for example. Now behind them, I have placed the Watchman Bowguard, a 5 melee attack, 4 missile unit with 11 total defense. Average accuracy, so not as good as the Woodland Hunters are in both the accuracy and the damage department, but they do come much better equipped, though they do have less arrows as well. But they are able to fight and sustain combat much better than the Woodland Hunters. And finally, we get to them, the other signature unit for Bree outside of Merchant Infantry. We have the Gatekeepers. Now, these guys, a bit of background, they're basically meant to be like Harry Goatleaf was the Gatekeeper Bree. They're kind of based on that idea that the city itself has its own town watch, and the Gatekeepers are that police force. These guys come equipped with a halberd and a crossbow, which is very unique. They inspire nearby troops, and they put down your stakes. They are good against armor, both in melee and with the crossbow, of course. And they have very respectable stats. Good morale is nice to see on the Bree roster. 6 melee, 8 missile attack, 4 charge isn't that great, but 16 total defense. Given the fact that they are halberds, they actually fight very well up against cavalry, which is not something that most other crossbows can afford to say. These guys will serve you very, very well. So get these anytime you can, though they do only come from Bree at the walls of Bree itself. So now I'll transition over to the upgraded visuals for your roster. And here we are now with the upgraded visuals. So this is the armor upgrade that you will unlock for your army should you side with the Dunedain. So starting with the Watchman units, they pick up the white tree on their chest pieces and on their shields here, or like the old garb of Arnor, and that is also seen in the Sword Guard and the Bow Guard, which I have laid out here and around the battlefield. I'm about to just let it pop off and let the AI just kind of fight the next enemy army for next week's faction. As you can see here in the Watchman Bow Guard also, we've got the Gatekeepers who pick up the kind of Merchant Infantry plate mail here, which makes them look really, really heavily armored. And I question how they even like see out of their helmets and actually aim with their crossbows when I look at that. Next to them, of course, the Watchman Bowguard again. Even the Hobbits join in on the color scheme, and they gain the Arnorian armor and the Arnorian symbols on their shield. Same with the Greenway Spearmen, who pick up the stars and the Scepter of Numenos on their shields as well, which is also picked up on the Greenway Riders, so their shields, some of them keep the kind of striped shield look, and some keep the original look there, but some actually have the new shields, and then that leaves the Bodyguard, who pick up, just like the Gatekeepers, the heavily armored plate mail, and it even looks like their maces develop a bit more as well. That's pretty much what you'll get. You'll only get these visuals if you join with the Dunedain. If you do not, you will have the standard kind of Bree-land colors, which makes it pretty cool. It's honestly one of my favorite features about Medieval 2 is the fact that you can have units that actually develop and grow over time, especially when you upgrade their armor. It just makes them look better. Like Spear Militia, for example, in base Medieval 2, they'll start off with, you know, basically just clothes, a spear, and a shield, and as you upgrade them, they'll have chainmail and like leather, and it just gets significantly better. So if you can't tell already who is next off in the distance, you can't tell by the arrow trails coming in, next week we will have the Men of Dale, who actually will be, I guess I could say this now, they will be getting an overhaul for version 6, but currently they are still basically the same as they were in version 4.6, still the same old Dale, and I'd have to double check the patch notes to see if anything was really done to Dale, but I can't think of really anything off the top of my head. But they will be getting a overhaul for the next version. When that comes out, I cannot give you an answer for at this time. It is still significantly in the future, and there hasn't really been much work to it. It's just being talked about, though there is some visual unit work being done behind the scenes. So they will be next week's video, and then followed by them, we will have, let me check my list, Dolamroth, Dolguldur, Derwinion, and then the Dunedain, because I didn't want to push them all the way off to later on, even though they're technically the Northern Dunedain. But that will be the schedule for the next few weeks, followed by Dunland, Anadwyth, Erebor, Eric Lewin, and so on and so forth. So keep expecting more and more content as the time comes. And look at this, the Watchmen Bogard are already routing. Look at that. That figures. But until the next one, my friends, I hope you are enjoying version 5, and I hope you get excited for version 6 in the far future. But until then, my friends, farewell.